The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council Chamber sparkled under the light of 3 suns as hundreds of alien delegates gathered in desperate urgency. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez sat in the human section, her dark eyes scanning the panicked faces around her. She had never seen the galaxy's most powerful leaders look so afraid. High Chancellor Zix of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the central podium, his translucent blue skin flickering with nervous energy patterns. His voice, transmitted through universal translators, carried a tremor that made every species in the chamber lean forward. Fellow beings of the galaxy, we face extinction. Zix began, his crystalline hand shaking as he activated the holographic display. The creatures we have named the Devourers have consumed 17 star systems in 3 months. They leave nothing behind but empty space and dead rock. The hologram showed the outer rim territories, once home to billions of beings, across dozens of worlds. Red markers indicated the consumed systems, spreading like a disease toward the galactic core. Elena watched as gasps and cries of despair filled the chamber from species who had lost entire homeworlds. General Vex of the Crothery warrior race stepped forward, his massive form towering over the other delegates. The Crothery had never known defeat in their 10,000-year history, yet even this legendary fighter looked broken. "My fleets engaged them at the Proxima defense line," he said, his deep voice heavy with shame. 47 war cruisers, each carrying 1,000 of our finest warriors. They lasted 6 hours before complete destruction. Elena knew the numbers were worse than General Vex admitted. Intelligence reports reaching Earth spoke of Crothery ships literally consumed from within, their crews devoured alive as bioorganic weapons ate through hull plating like it was soft fruit. Dr. Lyra Mindweaver of the Ethereal Collective floated to the speaking platform, her energy form pulsing with urgent colors. "We attempted peaceful contact with these Devourers," she announced. "Our greatest telepaths tried to reach their consciousness, to find common ground for negotiation. The feedback destroyed 12 of our most gifted minds instantly. These creatures do not think as we understand thinking. They know only hunger." The chamber erupted in frightened whispers as species after species shared their failed attempts to stop the advancing menace. The Technological Nexus Collective had thrown their most advanced automated defense systems against the Devourers, only to watch in horror as the creatures adapted and overcame each weapon within hours. The ancient wisdom keepers had consulted, prophecies stretching back millions of years, but found no guidance for facing such an enemy. Ambassador Krell of the Peaceful Alliance stood on his 6 legs, his voice carrying across the chamber with desperate hope. Surely there must be a diplomatic solution. In the history of our galaxy, no conflict has ever been resolved through violence alone. We must find a way to communicate, to understand what these Devourers want. Perhaps we can relocate to other sectors, find uninhabited worlds where both our species and theirs can survive. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber as delegates clung to the familiar comfort of negotiation and compromise. Elena noticed how they avoided looking at the holographic display, where the red markers of consumed worlds continued to expand in real time. Chancellor Zix raised his hands for silence. The Harmony Council has already attempted to establish a communication protocol. They sent their most experienced negotiators to the contested zones under flags of universal peace. The ships were consumed along with their crews. No trace remained except scattered atoms. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the reality of their situation settled over them like a shroud. Species that had existed for millions of years, civilizations that had survived galactic wars and cosmic disasters, now faced something that defied every principle they held sacred. Elena Rodriguez stood slowly, her human form small among the towering aliens around her. Every eye in the chamber turned toward her, and she felt the weight of their desperate hope. Humanity was the youngest species in the galactic community, barely 2 centuries into space travel, yet they looked to her as if she might have answers their ancient wisdom could not provide. "The Terran Federation has listened to your words," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "We have heard your pleas for peace, your calls for negotiation, your hopes for diplomatic solutions." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "But humanity has learned something different in our short time among the stars." She activated her personal communication device, and a holographic figure materialized above the council floor. Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison appeared in full military dress, his weathered face bearing scars from humanity's recent conflicts with space pirates and rogue AI systems. His cold blue eyes surveyed the alien delegates with the calculating gaze of a predator. "Respected members of the Galactic Council," Admiral Morrison began, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "The first human expeditionary force received your distress calls 72 hours ago. We have studied your reports, analyzed your tactical data, and reviewed the evidence of these Devourer attacks." Elena watched as hope flickered in Alien, eyes around the chamber. Perhaps the humans had found a solution that ancient wisdom had missed. Perhaps their fresh perspective could see opportunities that millennia of experience had overlooked. "Admiral," Morrison's expression hardened as he continued, "based on our analysis, humanity has reached a conclusion about how to deal with this threat. The first human expeditionary force is already en route to the contested zones. We did not come to negotiate." The chamber erupted in confusion as delegates tried to process what they had heard. Species that had spent millions of years perfecting the arts of diplomacy and peaceful resolution could not comprehend humanity's response to an existential threat. "You cannot mean to fight them," Chancellor Zix protested, his crystalline voice cracking with disbelief. "Every military force in the galaxy has been destroyed. The Krathari warrior fleets, the Nexus automated defenses, even the legendary star. Guardians fell before these creatures. What can your small human fleet accomplish where we have all failed?" Elena Rodriguez smiled, and something in that expression made several alien delegates step backward involuntarily. "Chancellor Zix, you misunderstand our position. We are not going to fight the Devourers." Her smile widened, showing teeth that suddenly seemed very sharp to the watching aliens. "We are going to teach them why humanity has never lost a war." "Admiral," Morrison's hologram flickered as he prepared to end the transmission. "To the Galactic Council, we offer this promise. The Devourer threat will end. How it ends depends on how quickly they learn that humanity does not negotiate with extinction." The transmission cut off, leaving the chamber in stunned silence as Elena Rodriguez gathered her materials and prepared to leave. Around her, the greatest minds in the galaxy struggled to comprehend what they had just witnessed. As she walked toward the exit, Elena heard Ambassador Krell whisper to his aide, "They cannot be serious. Surely they understand that violence only breeds more violence. No species has ever solved a crisis through warfare alone." Elena paused at the chamber doors and turned back to address the assembly one final time. "Honored delegates, you have spent your civilizations learning the arts of peace. Humanity spent its history perfecting the science of war. You will learn the difference." The doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate the terrifying possibility that their salvation might come from the one species they had never fully understood. Captain Lisa Bennett stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser UES Defiance as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Draconis system. The view screen showed a sight that had become all too familiar across the Outer Rim territories. Massive bioships the size of small moons writhed around the fourth planet like hungry parasites, their organic hulls pulsing with alien life as they systematically consumed everything on the world below. "Sensor report," Bennett ordered, her voice steady despite the horror displayed before them. Lieutenant Commander Rick Hayes worked frantically at his station, gathering data that would have sent most alien crews fleeing in terror. "Ma'am, I count 47 major bioforms and hundreds of smaller feeding vessels. The planet's atmospheric composition is changing rapidly as they process the biosphere. Estimated time until complete consumption is 18 hours. Bennett nodded grimly as she studied the tactical display. Every other species that had faced the Devourers had tried the same approach: engage the largest bioships with conventional weapons while attempting to evacuate civilian populations. The results had been universally catastrophic. The Devourers adapted to energy weapons within minutes, and their biological hulls regenerated faster than kinetic weapons could damage them. "Communications, patch me through to Admiral Morrison," Bennett ordered. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen within seconds, his expression grim as he reviewed the tactical situation from his flagship. "Captain Bennett, you are authorized to proceed with Operation Scorched Earth. Show these creatures what happens when they threaten human space." Bennett turned to her weapons officer, Commander Paul Davis, who had been preparing for this moment since they received their orders 3 days ago. "Commander Davis, arm nuclear torpedoes 1 through 12. Full-yield warheads. Proximity detonation." A shocked silence fell over the bridge as the crew processed what they had just heard. Nuclear weapons had been banned from space combat by every galactic treaty for over 2,000 years. The weapons were considered too destructive, too indiscriminate, too fundamentally wrong for civilized warfare. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Hayes said quietly, "the Galactic Warfare Convention specifically prohibits the use of nuclear weapons against biological targets. The radiation will contaminate the entire system." Bennett turned to face her young officer, and he saw something in her eyes that made him step back involuntarily. "Lieutenant, the Galactic Warfare Convention was written by species that never faced extinction. We are not here to follow their rules. We are here to win." A first nuclear torpedo streaked across space toward the largest bioship, a creature over 30 kilometers long that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as it fed. The alien ship's defensive systems, evolved over millions of years to deflect energy beams and absorb kinetic impacts, had no answer for the primitive destructive power of nuclear fission. The explosion lit up the system like a newborn star as the bioship died in agony, its death screams echoing across subspace frequencies that made every devourer in the system recoil in what could only be described as terror. For the first time in their species' history, the devourers encountered something that could kill them faster than they could adapt. "Target the feeding clusters," Bennett ordered as more torpedoes launched from the Defiance. "I want every bioform in this system dead within the hour." The nuclear barrage continued as human ships throughout the system joined the attack. Unlike the precise surgical strikes favored by other species, humanity brought the full weight of their most destructive weapons to bear without hesitation or mercy. Bioships that had survived encounters with entire alien fleets died in minutes as nuclear fire consumed them. On the surface of Draconis IV, Colonel Ryan Davis led the 47th Orbital Drop Battalion in humanity's first ground engagement against Devourer forces. The planet's surface crawled with organic constructs the size of skyscrapers, processing stations that broke down all biological matter and prepared it for consumption by the space-based bio-ships. Davis watched through his tactical display as his troops deployed weapons that would have horrified the Galactic Council. Chemical agents designed to break down organic compounds at the molecular level spread across devourer ground positions like deadly fog. Biological weapons created in Earth's most classified laboratories attacked the creature's cellular structure directly, causing them to dissolve from within. "Sir," reported Major Sandra Pierce over the communication network, "the enemy ground forms are attempting to adapt to our chemical weapons." They're showing resistance after approximately 40 minutes of exposure. Davis smiled grimly and sighed. His combat helmet as he watched his troops advance across terrain that would remain poisoned for centuries. Major Pierce, deploy the bacterial agents. Let's see them adapt to having their entire ecosystem destroyed. The human ground forces moved through the dying landscape like vengeful spirits, using tactics that no civilized species would ever consider. They poisoned water sources, contaminated soil, and released engineered pathogens that would make the planet uninhabitable for any organic life form. Where other species had tried to minimize collateral damage and preserve infrastructure, humans embraced total destruction as a tactical advantage. Major Pierce, commanding a mechanized assault unit equipped with flamethrowers and chemical sprayers, reported back to the fleet as her forces advanced through a Devourer processing center. Command: the enemy appears to be retreating from our positions. They're abandoning partially processed biomass and pulling back to defensive positions. The news spread through the human fleet like wildfire as officers tried to process what they were hearing. The Devourers, who had never retreated from any engagement in their recorded history, were actually falling back before human ground forces. Dr. Michelle Carter, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the command ship as samples of Devourer tissue arrived. From the battlefield, her analysis revealed something that changed everything they thought they knew about their enemy. Admiral Morrison, she reported over the ship's communication system, the biosamples show something unprecedented. The Devourer organisms are exhibiting stress responses we've never seen before. Their cellular structure is breaking down not just from our weapons, but from what can only be described as fear. Morrison studied the data streaming across his command screen as reports flooded in from across the system. Human forces were not just winning against the Devourers. They were terrifying them. Dr. Carter, explain what you mean by fear. These creatures are supposed to be a hive mind without individual consciousness. Carter's voice carried a note of amazement as she continued her analysis. Sir, the bioelectrical patterns in these samples indicate extreme psychological stress. The hive mind is experiencing an emotion it has never encountered before. They're not just adapting to our weapons. They're learning to be afraid of us. The battle for Draconis IV ended 18 hours later with the complete destruction of every Devourer presence in the system. No bioships escaped, no ground forms survived, and no trace of their biological processing systems remained functional. The planet itself would be uninhabitable for generations, its biosphere destroyed by human weapons that treated the entire world as acceptable. Collateral damage. As the human fleet prepared to jump to the next contested system, Admiral Morrison received a message that confirmed what Dr. Carter had discovered. Long-range sensors detected something that had never happened before in the galaxy's recorded history. Devourer bioships were retreating from human-controlled space. Captain Bennett stood on her bridge as the Defiance prepared for hyperspace. Jump, watching the dead world of Draconis IV recede behind them. Her communications officer looked up from his station with a mixture of pride and unease. Ma'am, we're receiving congratulations from the Galactic Council. They're calling it the first victory against the Devourers in galactic history. Bennett nodded as she studied the tactical reports showing Devourer forces pulling back across a dozen systems. Lieutenant, send a message to Admiral Morrison. Tell him the Devourers have learned their first lesson about fighting humanity. She paused as she looked at the dead world they were leaving behind, a planet that would never again support life because humanity had chosen victory over preservation. Tell him they're about to learn many more. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 weeks after humanity's victory at Draconis IV. But the atmosphere in the crystal chamber had changed completely. Where once there had been desperate hope, now there was something far more complex and troubling. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez entered the chamber to find hundreds of alien delegates whispering among themselves, their conversations stopping abruptly when they noticed her arrival. High Chancellor Zix stood at the central podium, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy patterns that Elena had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. "Ambassador Rodriguez," he began, his translated voice carrying an edge that had not been there during their previous meeting. "We have received disturbing reports about your species' methods of warfare." Elena took her place at the human delegations section, noting how the nearby alien representatives had moved their chairs slightly further away from her position. "Chancellor Zix, I assume you are referring to our successful defense of 17 star systems that were previously considered lost to the Devourers." A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the chamber as delegates exchanged glances. Chancellor Prime Zarian of the Peaceful Alliance rose from his seat, his 6 legs trembling with what Elena recognized as a mixture of gratitude and revulsion. "Ambassador Rodriguez, while we are grateful for your intervention, we must address the methods your species employed. Our monitoring stations recorded the use of nuclear weapons, chemical agents, and biological warfare on a scale that violates every galactic convention we have established over millions of years." Elena stood slowly, her human form small among the towering aliens, but somehow commanding their complete attention. "Prime Zarian, those conventions were written by species that had the luxury of fighting enemies who shared their values. The Devourers do not recognize treaties, do not respect civilian populations, and do not limit their destructive capabilities to preserve future diplomatic relations." Dr. Lyra Mindweaver of the Ethereal Collective floated forward, her energy form pulsing with disturbed colors. "But the worlds you defended, Ambassador Rodriguez, they will remain uninhabitable for centuries. You have saved them from consumption, only to render them permanently dead. How can you call this victory?" The question hung in the air as Elena considered her response. She had expected this reaction from species that had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to minimize conflict and preserve life. What they could not understand was that humanity had learned different lessons during their rise to galactic citizenship. "Dr. Mindweaver, I will answer your question with one of my own," Elena replied, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "Which is preferable, a dead world that might someday be terraformed and inhabited again, or a consumed world that exists only as processed matter and devourer bioships?" Before anyone could respond, Elena activated her communication device, and Admiral Morrison's holographic image appeared above the council floor. The Admiral looked even more battle-worn than during their previous meeting, his uniform bearing the marks of recent combat operations. "Honored delegates," Morrison began without preamble, "while you have been debating the morality of our methods, the first human expeditionary force has achieved something your species considered impossible. The Devourer advance has not only been stopped, it has been reversed." The chamber fell silent as Morrison activated a tactical display showing the Outer Rim territories. The red markers that had indicated consumed worlds were now surrounded by blue zones marking successful human defensive operations. More significantly, new markers showed Devourer forces retreating deeper into unexplored space. In 3 weeks of combat operations, human forces have reclaimed or defended 42 star systems. We have destroyed over 200 major bioships and countless smaller devourer organisms. Most importantly, we have achieved something that I believe you will find even more significant. Morrison paused as the tactical display zoomed in on a sector where human forces had been conducting deep space operations. The Devourers are no longer attacking inhabited systems. They are fleeing from any region where human ships have been detected. General Vex of the Krathri warrior race leaned forward in his massive chair, his scarred face showing a mixture of admiration and confusion. Admiral Morrison, how is this possible? My warriors fought with honor and courage against these creatures, but they showed no fear of death or pain. What makes them flee from human forces? Morrison's expression hardened as he prepared to deliver information that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed both humanity and the Devourers. General Vex, your warriors fought with honor, but they fought according to rules the Devourers understood. They engaged in direct combat. They attempted to minimize collateral damage, and they fought to protect rather than to destroy. The Admiral gestured to data streaming across the tactical display. Human forces employ what we call total war doctrine. We do not fight to defeat the enemy. We fight to ensure the enemy can never threaten anyone again. The Devourers have encountered something in our warfare that they have never experienced before. Elena watched as confusion spread through the assembly. These species had evolved beyond the concept of total warfare, developing sophisticated diplomatic and military traditions that emphasized proportional response and eventual reconciliation. The idea that any intelligent species would choose complete destruction over negotiated settlement was alien to their understanding. Commander, Alex Turner's voice crackled through the communication system as his Deep Space Reconnaissance Unit reported in from the Galactic Rim. Admiral Morrison, we have confirmation of the enemy's new behavior patterns. Devourer bioships are actively avoiding any system where human technology signatures had been detected, even if those systems contain significant biological resources. Dr. Michelle Carter's research findings appeared on the tactical display as she transmitted from her laboratory aboard the fleet flagship. Delegates of the Galactic Council, our analysis of captured devourer organisms has revealed something unprecedented in xenobiological research. The hive mind is exhibiting what can only be classified as trauma responses. The chamber erupted in startled exclamations as delegates tried to process what they were hearing. The concept of a hive mind experiencing individual psychological trauma was theoretically impossible according to every model of collective consciousness they had studied. Dr. Carter, Chancellor Zix interrupted, his crystalline voice cracking. With disbelief, you cannot be suggesting that these creatures are experiencing fear. They have consumed entire civilizations without showing any emotional responses whatsoever. Carter's voice carried a note of scientific amazement as she continued her explanation. Chancellor Zix, the bioelectrical patterns we have recorded show clear indicators of what humans would recognize as post-traumatic stress. The hive mind is not just learning to fear human weapons. It is learning to fear what humanity represents. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward as the implications of Carter's research began to sink in among the assembled delegates. Honored members of the Galactic Council, you asked how we could justify our methods. Dr. Carter's research provides your answer. We have not simply defeated the Devourers in battle. We have taught them that some prey is too dangerous to hunt. Ambassador Krell of the Peaceful Alliance stood on his 6 legs, his voice trembling with a mixture of gratitude and horror. But at what cost, Ambassador Rodriguez? The weapons you have used, the tactics you have employed, they go against everything. Our civilizations have learned about conflict resolution. How can we celebrate victories that require us to abandon our most fundamental values? Elena's response silenced the chamber as she spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who had seen the alternative to human methods. Ambassador Krell, your civilizations learned to value life and seek peaceful solutions because you had the luxury of facing enemies who shared those values. Humanity learned different lessons because we faced enemies who did not. She gestured to the tactical display showing the retreating Devourer forces. You can debate the morality of our methods, but you cannot debate the results. The extinction-level threat that your combined fleets could not stop has been driven back by human forces in 3 weeks. The choice before you is simple. Accept that sometimes peace can only be achieved through superior violence. Or watch your civilizations disappear while maintaining your moral superiority. Admiral Morrison's hologram flickered as he prepared to end the transmission. To the Galactic Council, we offer this assurance. The Devourer threat to inhabited systems has ended. How you choose to view humanity's role in that ending is your decision to make. The transmission cut off, leaving the chamber in stunned silence as the greatest diplomatic minds in the galaxy struggled to reconcile their relief at survival with their horror at the methods that had ensured it. Elena Rodriguez gathered her materials as conversations erupted around her, knowing that humanity had not just defeated an enemy, but had fundamentally changed how the galaxy would view the youngest species in their community. 6 months after humanity's war against the Devourers began, the galaxy faced a reality none of them had anticipated. The unstoppable force that had consumed 17 star systems and threatened the very existence of galactic civilization was now retreating to the furthest edges of known space. Human ships patrolled the outer rim territories with a efficiency that both impressed and terrified the species they protected. General Patricia Hayes stood in the command center of the orbital fortress above New Geneva, studying tactical reports that painted a picture of complete military dominance. Her Marine Corps units had engaged Devourer ground forces in 43 separate battles and had never once retreated or failed to achieve their objectives. The enemy that had crushed every other military force in the galaxy fled at the first. Detection of human troops. "Ma'am," Colonel Luke Parker reported as he entered the command center, still wearing the radiation-scarred armor from his latest reconnaissance mission. "We have confirmed intelligence on Devourer fallback positions. They've established what appears to be a defensive perimeter around their core territories in the Void Nebula." Hayes studied the tactical display showing the enemy's new positions, instead of the aggressive expansion patterns that had characterized their previous behavior. The Devourers had pulled back to heavily fortified positions in space that offered maximum protection from human pursuit. "Colonel Parker, what's your assessment of their defensive capabilities?" Parker activated his helmet recorder, displaying footage from his deep space reconnaissance mission that made even veteran Marines shift uncomfortably. "General, they're not just defending territory anymore. They're building what can only be described as fortress bioships, massive constructs designed specifically to counter human weapon systems." The implications of Parker's report spread through the human command structure like wildfire. For the first time since the war began, the Devourers were adapting their tactics based on human capabilities rather than simply fleeing from contact. The hive mind was learning to fight back. Admiral Morrison received the intelligence report aboard his flagship while coordinating patrol operations across 6 star systems. His staff gathered around the holographic display as Parker's reconnaissance data painted a disturbing picture of Devourer evolution. "They're learning," Morrison said quietly, his scarred face showing the strain of months of continuous combat operations. "The question is whether they're learning fast enough to pose a renewed threat." Dr. Michelle Carter worked frantically in her expanded laboratory complex, analyzing biosamples that Parker's team had retrieved from the edge of Devourer territory. Her findings would change everything about how humanity viewed their enemy and themselves. "Admiral Morrison," she reported, "over the ship's communication system, you need to see what we discovered about the Devourer specimens." Morrison and his senior staff gathered in Carter's laboratory as she displayed her analysis on the main screen. The bioelectrical patterns she had recorded showed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of the hive mind. "Sir, these samples contain genetic material that doesn't match anything we've seen before. The Devourers aren't just adapting their weapons and tactics. They're evolving at the cellular level." The revelation sent shockwaves through the human command structure as officers tried to process what they were hearing. The enemy they had been fighting was not a static opponent, but a species capable of rapid evolutionary change in response to threats. Dr. Carter, Morrison asked carefully, are you saying they're becoming something different? Carter's response carried implications that would force humanity to confront the most difficult decision in their history. Admiral, the genetic changes we're seeing suggest they're developing new biological systems, specifically designed to survive human weapons. But more importantly, we're seeing the emergence of what appears to be individual consciousness within the hive mind. Commander Alex Turner transmitted from his position at the edge of Devourer territory, his reconnaissance ships maintaining a careful distance from the enemy's new defensive positions. Command, we're detecting unusual bioelectrical activity from the fortress constructs. The patterns suggest internal communication that doesn't match their previous hive mind signatures. The implications of Turner's observations became clear as Dr. Carter analyzed the new data. Admiral Morrison, what Commander Turner is detecting appears to be individual devourer organisms developing separate consciousness. The trauma responses we documented earlier may have triggered an evolutionary split within their species. President. Catherine Walsh's voice crackled through the quantum communication relay from Earth, carrying the weight of humanity's growing isolation within the galactic community. Admiral Morrison, I need to brief you on the political situation developing here. Half the Galactic Council now views humanity as a greater threat than the Devourers ever were. Morrison's expression hardened as he listened to the President's report. The same species that had begged for human intervention now questioned whether humanity's methods had created a more dangerous problem than they had solved. Madam President, what specific concerns are the Council raising? Walsh's response revealed the depth of galactic fear regarding humanity's military capabilities. Admiral, they're demanding that we cease all offensive operations against the Devourers and submit to galactic oversight of our weapons programs. The Eternal Observers have invoked ancient prophecies about a destroyer species that would bring both salvation and extinction to the galaxy. General Hayes interrupted the communication as urgent reports flooded in from the Outer Rim territories. Admiral Morrison, we have a developing situation that requires immediate attention. Colonel Parker's reconnaissance team has made contact with what appears to be a Devourer delegation. The command center fell silent as everyone tried to process what Hayes had just announced. In the entire history of the galactic conflict, no Devourer organism had ever attempted to communicate with any other species. The hive mind had shown no interest in diplomacy, negotiation, or any form of interaction beyond consumption. Colonel Parker's voice transmitted from his position near the Void Nebula, carrying a mixture of amazement and uncertainty. Command, I'm receiving bioelectrical signals that Dr. Carter's translation protocols are interpreting as communication attempts. The patterns are unlike anything we've recorded from the hive mind. Dr. Carter worked frantically to decode the alien transmissions as they arrived in real time. Her translation programs, designed to interpret the hive mind's collective consciousness, struggled to process what appeared to be individual voices speaking separately within the Devourer signal. Admiral Morrison, I'm reading multiple distinct communication sources. This isn't the hive mind speaking. These appear to be individual Devourer organisms attempting to establish contact. The first translated message that emerged from Carter's analysis would fundamentally change humanity's understanding of their enemy and force them to confront a question they had never expected to face. Admiral Morrison, the translation is complete. The message reads, we yield, we retreat, allow continuation. Young consume worlds no more. Old mind breaks. New minds seek survival path. Morrison stared at the translated message as its implications became clear. The Devourers were not just retreating. They were surrendering. More importantly, they were indicating that their species was undergoing a fundamental transformation that might Eliminate their world-consuming behavior entirely. General Hayes stepped forward, her expression grim as she considered the military. Implications. Admiral Morrison, if the Devourers are genuinely attempting to surrender, we need to make a decision about our response. Our forces are positioned to complete the extermination of their species within 6 months. The weight of awe. That decision settled over the command center as humanity faced a choice that would define their place in galactic history. They possessed the military capability to end the Devourer threat permanently through complete annihilation. But they also faced the possibility that their enemy was evolving into something that might no longer pose a threat to galactic civilization. President. Walsh's voice cut through the silence with a question that would determine the future of both species. Admiral Morrison, based on your assessment of the situation, what are humanity's options moving forward? Morrison studied the tactical displays showing human forces positioned around Devourer territory like a closing fist. His next words would shape not just the outcome of the war, but humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. Madam President, we have 3 choices. We can complete the extermination and eliminate the Devourer threat permanently. We can accept their surrender and risk a renewed threat in the future. Or we can attempt something that has never been done before in galactic history. The silence that followed carried the weight of humanity's evolution from a species that fought for survival to one that would determine the survival of others. The largest gathering of human military leadership in galactic history assembled aboard the flagship UE's Retribution, floating in space at the edge of Devourer territory. Admiral Morrison stood before the holographic projections of commanders, generals, and political leaders from across human space, knowing that their decision would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. General Patricia Hayes activated her communication link from the orbital fortress above New Geneva, her voice carrying the weight of 6 months of brutal warfare. Admiral Morrison, my forces are positioned to begin the final assault on Devourer core territories. We can eliminate every bioship and organism within 36 hours. The threat would end permanently. President Catherine Walsh's image flickered as she transmitted from Earth, her expression showing the strain of political pressure from both human colonies and galactic allies. Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Council has issued an ultimatum. They demand that we either accept the Devourer, surrender immediately, or face economic and military sanctions from every member species. Dr. Michelle Carter stepped forward in the ship's conference room, her hands shaking as she held the latest analysis of Devourer biosamples. Admiral Morrison, you need to understand what we're really facing. The genetic changes in these organisms aren't just evolutionary adaptation. They're becoming something fundamentally different from what attacked us 6 months ago. Morrison studied the data streaming across the tactical displays as reports flooded in from human forces positioned around the Void Nebula. The Devourers had ceased all aggressive activities and were transmitting continuous surrender signals. But their bioships remained capable of devastating destruction if they chose to resume hostilities. Colonel Luke Parker's voice crackled through the communication system from his position closest to the Devourer lines. Admiral Morrison, the individual organisms that separated from the hive mind are requesting direct communication. They're offering to submit to genetic modification in exchange for survival. The implications of Parker's report sent shockwaves through the assembled leadership as they tried to process what they were hearing. The idea of voluntarily modifying an entire species had never been attempted in galactic history, but it offered a third option that neither complete extermination nor simple surrender could provide. Commander Alex Turner transmitted from his deep space reconnaissance position, his ships monitoring Devourer territory for any signs of deception or hidden threats. Command, long-range sensors show something unprecedented. The Devourer bioships are actually consuming and breaking down their own weapon systems. They appear to be dismantling their ability to wage war. Dr. Carter's analysis of the latest bioelectrical transmissions revealed the depth of change occurring within Devourer society. Admiral Morrison, the individual consciousness that emerged from the hive mind trauma, is spreading through their entire species. They're not just offering surrender. They're offering to become something that cannot threaten galactic civilization. Morrison walked to the observation deck of his flagship, staring out at the space where human and Devourer forces faced each other, across a distance measured in light minutes. Behind him, the greatest military minds humanity had produced waited for his decision about the fate of two species. Admiral Lisa Bennett joined Morrison at the observation windows, her own ship having led the first successful attack against Devourer forces at Draconis IV. Sir, we have the capability to end this threat forever. No future generation of humans will have to face what we faced. Isn't that worth more than the possibility of redemption for a species that nearly destroyed the galaxy? Morrison considered Bennett's words as he watched the distant lights of Devourer bioships on the tactical display. Every military instinct he had developed over decades of warfare told him to eliminate the threat completely while humanity held the advantage. But something deeper, something that spoke to what humanity could become rather than what they had been, pushed him toward a different choice. Admiral Bennett, Morrison said quietly, we didn't fight this war to become the galaxy's exterminators. We fought so that others wouldn't have to face extinction. The question is whether we're strong enough to show mercy when we have the power to choose annihilation. President Walsh's voice interrupted their conversation as urgent communications. Arrived from Earth. Admiral Morrison, I've received word from the Eternal Observers. They're willing to provide ancient technology that could monitor and enforce any genetic modifications we implement. The galaxy is offering to help us create a solution that has never been attempted before. General Hayes transmitted from her command center, her voice carrying reluctant acceptance of what was becoming clear to the entire human leadership. Admiral Morrison, my Marines didn't fight and die so we could become monsters. If there's a way to end this threat without genocide, we owe it to them to try. Dr. Carter's final analysis appeared on the main display as she completed her evaluation of the Devourer transformation. Admiral Morrison, the genetic modifications they're proposing would fundamentally alter their species. They would retain their intelligence and ability to survive, but lose the biological drives that made them consume entire worlds. They would become capable of coexistence rather than consumption. Morrison returned to the conference room where the holographic images of human leadership waited for his decision. The tactical displays showed human forces positioned to deliver the final blow to an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for months, but also showed an enemy that was offering to transform itself into something that could never again pose such a threat. Ladies and gentlemen, Morrison began, his voice carrying across human space to commanders and politicians who would implement whatever decision he made. 6 months ago, the galaxy faced extinction at the hands of an enemy that knew only hunger and destruction. Today, we face a choice about what kind of species humanity will become. He gestured to the tactical displays showing the Devourer positions. We have the power to eliminate this threat completely through overwhelming force. We also have an opportunity to demonstrate that humanity's greatest strength is not our ability to destroy our enemies, but our ability to transform them into something better. The silence that followed carried the weight of human evolution, as Morrison prepared to announce the decision that would define their place in galactic history. The Terran Federation chooses conditional survival for the Devourer species. We will work with galactic scientists to implement genetic modifications that eliminate their world-consuming capabilities while preserving their intelligence and right to exist. General Hayes was the first to respond, her voice carrying acceptance of a decision that went against every military doctrine but honored something deeper about human values. Admiral Morrison, my forces will maintain security positions during the modification process. If they show any signs of reverting to their previous behavior, we will be ready to complete the original mission. Dr. Carter's excitement was obvious as she began planning the most ambitious xenobiological project in galactic history. Admiral Morrison, this will require cooperation between human scientists and experts from dozens of other species. We're essentially creating a new form of life from an existing one. President Walsh's relief was clear as she considered the political implications of Morrison's decision. Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Council will view this as proof that humanity can be trusted with the military power you've demonstrated. You've shown that we can choose mercy when we have the strength to choose otherwise. Colonel Parker transmitted from the Devourer boundary, his voice carrying wonder as he observed the enemy's response to humanity's decision. Admiral Morrison, the Devourer organisms are transmitting what our translation systems are reading as gratitude. They're actually thanking us for choosing their survival over their destruction. Morrison looked out at the stars, where human ships maintained their positions around former enemies who were becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. Colonel Parker, send this message to the Devourer representatives. Humanity fought to preserve life in the galaxy. That includes the right of every species to exist, as long as they choose to coexist rather than consume. The modification process took 5 years and represented the galaxy's first successful transformation of an extinction-level threat into a contributing member of galactic civilization. The new Devourer subspecies, no longer driven by the biological imperative to consume worlds, became valuable partners in terraforming and biological research. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as Earth's first galactic ambassador general, addressed the final session of the Crisis Council as representatives from hundreds of species gathered to witness the conclusion of humanity's war. Honored delegates, you pleaded for peace when faced with extinction. Humanity answered with war, but war was never our final answer. It was the tool we used to make true peace possible. The galaxy was safer, but it would never forget the lesson. Humanity had taught them about the relationship between strength and mercy. When faced with an unstoppable force, humanity had become an immovable object. When given the choice between annihilation and redemption, they had chosen to transform their enemies rather than destroy them.